Hey there, YouTube. Medwitch here. Today is going to be the very first episode of my path. So, I would like to start, as soon as I find my lighter, by inviting the goddess and the god. This is how you'd be looking at the altar if you were actually at the altar. So, this is just a little starter altar. It's not the complete version yet, only because one, it is quite expensive to get an altar, even if you do like a thrift store thing. Or where I'm at, there's not many pagan stuff around, so I actually have to go online and order my stuff. So you can just invite the feminine and the masculine divine, and during learning lessons, I guess you can call it, we will invite the element of air as well. So, trusty lighter, the white candle, stationed in front of the goddess. We will welcome the feminine divine to our lessons of learning. There we go. We got the goddess. We invite the masculine divine to our lessons of learning. And now, I like to use dragon's blood incense. They just have that scent that inspires learning. I don't have an incense holder yet. I wish I really did. Incense are one way of uh, representing the element of air. It can also be represented by a feather. But I like using incense better because it actually does provide that aroma. So I will be using the goddess to light the air. We welcome the element of air to this lesson of learning. Okay, so today's lesson I will be talking about the gods and goddesses that I personally follow in my particular path. As an eclectic solitary practitioner, I do borrow from other cultural aspects. And because of these these very diverse cultural aspects, mind you, it can get kind of confusing of why somebody would want to do something like this. The main reason why somebody would do something like this is because there are just too many ancient cultures and too many gods to just, pick one culture. There are, however, traditional and recreational that do just stick to one culture. I want to talk about first my three primary deities. Primary deities that anybody worships are called patron deities, or matron deities if you're just focusing around the feminine. To me, patron can be both masculine and feminine, just for the sake of equality, but normally it does just mean masculine. I know I touched up a little bit about it, but now I want to go more in depth. So this might be a longer video. If you've already stayed with me this long, please hang in there just a little bit longer. This is just going to be about the deities that I follow. And it's not a very long list at all, but it does require some explanation of where these gods come from, what they represent, and why I chose them. So the very first god I would like to talk about is Baphomet. He is a horned god, which all horned deities represent a sense of fertility in one way, form, or another. Baphomet is the god of magic and of balance. Within his symbolism, uh, which is his depiction on any pictures or whatever that you see of Baphomet, he has a flaming torch, a goat's head, a woman's body with a fish scale stomach, black wings, goat's legs, his right hand pointed up to a white moon and his left hand pointing down to a black moon. This represents everything in balance. The reason why I follow him is because that is what I personally strive to achieve, is balance. And he reminds me of that balance. He also reminds me that you cannot have one without the other. You have to take the good with the bad. You can't have strictly male properties without your female properties as well. This meaning that even scientifically, within our own biology, even as a man, yes, I have testosterone and lots of it, but I also have estrogen, just not as much, but I still have it. We both have X and Y chromosomes, no matter who you are. He's fairly easy to explain. The goat's head and legs represents Earth. The head itself really represents the flesh, while the legs represent the element. The torch on his head represents both the element of fire and also the spirit bound to the flesh. Which, I mean, if you're here watching this, then your soul is bound to your flesh, and that's where it's going to stay until you die. Or until you start meditating. One of the two. The wings represents the element of air, while the fish scales on his stomach represent the element of water. He, like I said, he has a female form, so he does have a woman's breast, and this is a more of a nurturing and strength providing aspect of him. In between his legs, he has a rod with two snakes intertwined around it, and then a semicircle. This represents the dual of sexuality, masculine and feminine. It represents fertility, especially in males, in this case, especially males. And it also represents the heavens with the dome piece. So, the history of Baphomet is somewhere around Italy, I want to say, when the Knights Templar were prominent. The Knights Templar worshipped him. Later on in life, he was then adopted by Anton LaVey and his version of Satanism. A lot of occultists and even modern day pagans are starting to use Baphomet as a symbol of the horned deity. For one, I'm actually glad that this is happening, because granted, Baphomet is a semi-newer god aspect, and he, it doesn't matter how new the deity is, they still deserve respect. Look at the flying spaghetti monster in Pastafarianism. It is a very new deity, and it still deserves respect because it does have a following. I'm not saying nothing, I'm just saying. The next deity we're going to talk about is the female aspect. Now, I know you guys might find this a little strange, but hear me out. The female aspect is my second primary deity. She's Lilith. Now, I'm not talking about Lilith as in the Judeo-Christian Bible Lilith. I'm talking about Lilith as in the Sumerian Lilith. The Sumerian Lilith was originally a dark goddess, which means that the dark moon, the new moon, is what she is represented by. She is also known as the screech owl. Her symbols, her animal symbols, are the owl and the snake. And this is where it kind of ties into the biblical sense with the snake and everything, and the whole Jewish story of Lilith being Adam's first wife. Now the Jewish, and well, I should say the biblical stories, period, twisted Lilith's meaning around to be the exact opposite of what she represents. Lilith is first and foremost a protector of women, especially in childbirth, and an extreme protector of infantile children, which means 5 or younger, toddler, infant, toddler age area. She protects them. That is her domain. So a lot of times, a midwife from back then would actually call Lilith to help with the pregnancy to make sure that both the mother and the child survive. And this, I think, is actually very good. Another thing I like about Lilith is she is 100% feminine. Meaning that, you've heard of feminists. Well, Lilith was the first feminist. Sorry to say it, but she was. And the reason why is because she, as I said, she looked over especially pregnant women, but she didn't believe that she needed a man herself. She did, within the mythos, have a husband, and I forgot his name. He was one of the primary deities of ancient Sumeria. So I'm sorry about that. Since I don't follow that deity, I really didn't pay much attention to it. I just pay attention to my own deities. So I'm sorry if I'm offending anybody who follows any Sumerian gods. But that's the reason why I like Lilith, is because she does represent everything that's good and represents the strength of femininity, plain and simple. Now, on the complete opposite end, we have the god. Again, this is going to be kind of controversial, but anybody who knows, who actually goes and does their research outside of the Bible would realize that Lucifer is, one, he's not a sun deity. He is a solar deity, which means he does take aspects of the sun, but he is not the sun itself. Lucifer was a Roman god until the Bible took his godliness away. Lucifer was a minor god at that, and he was a pseudo-warrior god, meaning that his image, he did carry a morning star, which is a mace. It's a mace about this big, and it has a whole bunch of pointy spikes about it, and it was called a morning star, which his image was a play on his name, because as the morning star, he is represented by the planet Venus, which is the first star you see coming into the sky just before the sun, and is the last star you see just as the sun goes bye-bye. He's also known as the light bearer, which, again, the same thing. He's basically the herald of the sun. He's basically trumpeting the sun deity, his coming. And like I said, he has ties with Venus. I forgot how he is tied to Venus. So again, I'm sorry on that. But the reason why he's the opposite of Lilith is because he is the protector of men, especially the working class men. He does have a battle-like aspect to him, though that was not his primary cause. It was mainly the protection of young men and men who were working. So the lower class really loved him, and because of the fondness that he did have, even as a minor deity, that's why the Christian religion did what they did to him. Same with Lilith, that's why they did it to her. It's because she was very well loved. This is what happens. The victors write the history. They were victorious. They said these two gods, and they say these two deities are bad. Stop worshiping him. Worship our God. Yada yada yada. On a lighter note, so these are from two different sources themselves. Two Italian gods, Baphomet and Lucifer, and a Sumerian god, Lilith. Now, here's the third range that I'm going to. Again, it's another two deities. The triple goddess Morrigan and the horned god Cernunnos, or Cyrnos, or Kyrinos, or however you pronounce it. If there's any other pronunciation, there are many, many ways to pronounce his name from throughout history. But I actually I couldn't find any of my notes on the gods, and it kind of pissed me off. Throughout all my moving, I'm pretty sure I lost a lot of my notes. They weren't permanently sealed in any book of shadows, so now I have to find it again. It kind of ticks me off. But the triple goddess is made of three gods. Anu, which is the maiden aspect of it, representing magic, the moon, air, fertility, and prosperity. She is the goddess of plenty and representative of Mother Earth. The second aspect, and I just passed her up, is Bod, or Bab, or Bahab, or Banba. The goddess Morgan, or I should say the Morgan, has many, many aspects to her. And throughout my research, I have actually found three different forms of the Morgan. This is the primary form of the Morgan that I follow. And maybe in another video, because I'm already running on 19 minutes, in another video I'll explain the Morgan more. So Bod is the mother aspect. She symbolizes life, enlightenment, wisdom, and inspiration. She is also known as the boiling cauldron, the battle raven, or the scalded crow. So, as it goes on, you could actually see how how she manifests as she's going about. Now, mind you, the Morgan is actually a trio of sisters, not just one deity getting older. It's a trio of sisters. Oh. Sorry, my phone is super slow today. The third aspect, finally, the crone, is matcha, or she's also known as Mana Minya uh, Nahim, and she represents. She is a goddess of war. She represents life and death in its fullest. Uh, she also uh, represents cunning, death, sheer physical force. She's a protector of both battle and peace. She is known as the crow or raven, and is also known as the queen of phantoms. So, as you can see, every single time it gets better, or as it moves along the progression of life, so does the Morgan. And that is the reason why I like the Morgan so much, is because it actually plays through the life so perfectly. That's, as a child or the maiden, you're spirited, you're free, you're able to learn. Then when you become older, an adult, or the mother, then you know, lived your life. You lived, you got all your childishness out the way, and now you're ready to be responsible and struggle to keep what you have and to earn what you keep. And then finally, the crone aspect is you're just sitting there trying to fight out the last of your days, and you want to be able to teach others before you go. And that in and of itself is a battle, because you do have a lot of closed-minded people out there. So the Morgan, in and of herself, and the reason why I picked the Morgan and Cernunnos is for the same reason, is that these two do represent death, while these two up here represent life. You have to have balance, and that is what my primary deity, the deity at top, represents. You have to have balance. So I chose the Morgan because she is, or I should say, they are just the perfect story of life. To me, myself, that is how I interpret the symbolism of the Morgan. Now, Cernunnos. Many people will know Cernunnos as having antlers, and that's the version I like better, is the antler version. Because that to me is more wild. When you think of ram's horns or goat's horns, you think of a domesticated animal, and that's just, or a farm animal, and that's not what Cernunnos represents. Cernunnos represents the wild. He's the protector of pretty much everything. Anything wild, he's a protector of. So even if you do have, if you do have that wild aspect, or that love of nature, Cernunnos is the perfect god for you. He is also the sign of fertility. He's also, as a horn god, all horn gods, like I said, are symbols of fertility. And that's actually where the word horny comes from, is the horn gods, especially Pan. So watch out for him. He's a horny little fucker. But again, as the Morgan, he is a representative of death. He does rule over the underworld. He also, he's also the leader of the Wild Hunt, which takes place around Samhain, and that's when the spirits are loose and free and able to go, and Cernunnos goes out and reels them back in. There's a whole history of him basically being primaries to the Druids, which I find absolutely fascinating. And then it also gives a little history about how he became the image of the Christian devil, which in and of itself is sad. You know, because there's nothing bad about a fertility god of death. And that means a fertility god of death does sound like a contradiction, but with a lot of pagan traditions, a lot of aspects do revolve around reincarnation. So being a fertile death god basically means that you represent both life and death and the reincarnation of life and death. And that's pretty much about it. And that's the reason why I chose him, is because, again, he represents the duality of life and death. To me, Cernunnos is the judge of the afterlife. When you die, you go to him. He will decide what happens. That's my take on it. It's not historically or mythologically accurate, but that, to me, is what Cernunnos is. He's the judger. He decides if you come back or if you stay. And now, since our days have concluded, I'm going to let the incense burn a little while longer. The dragon blood has actually gotten to my head. The smoke has actually been going in my face and in my mouth this whole entire time. So, if you're in an enclosed area with incense, please don't inhale that. I'm a smoker, so it doesn't bother me much. But I want to let it burn. But since our teaching is over, let us dismiss the ones that we've called. Elements of air, thank you for joining us in our lessons. You may go when you please. The divine masculine, thank you for joining us in our lessons. You may go when you please. The divine feminine, thank you for joining in our lessons. You may go when you please. Whew, burnt myself on that one. For those of you who don't know, the reasons why I did not blow them out is because it is actually disrespectful. So if you are new to the crafts, don't, blow out the candles. If you can't handle the quick little burn, and you'll get used to it after a while. I haven't done it in a while, so my fingers are, little pansies right now. But if you don't feel like burning your fingers doing that, you could always lick them, put it out. It helps a little bit. Or you can get a little snuffer. They sell them. They're actually relatively cheap. The cheapest one I've ever seen was maybe about $5. You could probably find them cheaper. If you do, let me know. And thank you all for being with me today. And I will see you next week. I am going to come up with a lessons plan throughout this next week, so hopefully it's a good one. And as always, blessed be.